All right, so welcome everybody. This is the McGill Scientific Writing Initiative workshop on the research panel. It's Wednesday, October 28th, 6 p.m. So today we're going to be introducing the panel of undergraduate students who wrote research articles throughout their undergrad. We have 5 speakers today. We have Alina, Armaan, Mara, Amir, and Jovan. So we're going to start. Go ahead.
Can I get the next slide?
Yes.
Hi guys, my name's Alina. I'm a U3 neuroscience student. So just a brief overview of my research experience. So the first lab I joined at McGill was Dr. Flores' lab over at the Douglas Hospital, looking at dopamine axon development during adolescence. I wanted to get more experience with cellular and molecular techniques, so I worked in Dr. Yang's lab for several summers looking at circRNAs. And then I became really interested in synaptic plasticity just from what I was learning in classes. So I joined Dr. Jia's lab at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And we looked at the role of these AMPA receptor subunits in synaptic plasticity. And I also worked on a side project on Alzheimer's, so I thought I might want to focus on that. And I currently work in Dr. Claudio Cuello's lab, looking at early inflammation in Alzheimer's.
Amazing. Is this something you want to speak about? Something from your research?
I think that's just what was on Facebook, right? I was just explaining what was in my publications. Oh my God, the font.
No problem. Perfect. Okay, we're going to get back to you with more questions, but just a little introduction of everyone.
Hi everyone, my name's Armaan. Very happy to be here. Nice to see a lot of you. So for me, my research has been predominantly focused in psychiatry. That's been mostly my interest while at McGill. And so I've worked at like multiple different scales, so all the way from like clinical work, preclinical work, so working with animals, and also just basic science. And it's been really interesting to see the whole spectrum of types of research that can be done in this field. Some of the topics that I've worked on before include depression and suicidality. I've studied cannabinoids, also psychosis. And now in my last year, I'm working on something completely different. And I'm working on mechanisms of cell death in Parkinson's disease. So I can talk a little bit more about my experience specifically. So my first year got involved with Dr. Turecki's lab at the McGill Group for Suicide Studies at the Douglas. This was my first research experience, so it was hard to get any kind of like independence or things like that, but I learned a lot of techniques. So what I was working on here was on the gut microbiome brain axis. And so we had postmortem human tissue, so people would donate their lives. And so what we would do is, my project was basically to look at the enteric nervous system, which is like the lining of your gut, and basically see if there are any morphological and functional differences between these systems. And so I worked here until my U1 year. My U1 year, all until the end of that. And yeah, so after my first year summer, I worked with the Group for Suicide and Depression Studies at St. Michael's Hospital. It's a hospital affiliated with the University of Toronto. And my work here was basically a chart review. So we took suicide presentation to the emergency department over a 2-year period. And basically we're looking back for clinical factors and clinical outcomes. So things that the physicians would write off about the patient as they were discharged or admitted to an inpatient unit. And what I was looking at specifically was the homeless population and what the differential susceptibility and the different clinical presentations and systemic factors that they present with. And so that's what my publication was about. So we published on our work there. Then in my 3rd year, I was working in the Flores lab, similar to Alina. And I was working on cannabinoids. So we were basically looking at how cannabinoids in adolescence affect the behavioral development. So in adulthood, after these animals were treated with cannabinoids, we were basically examining their differential susceptibility to stress. So whether they would develop depressive phenotypes when encountered with extreme stress, and also to impulsive behaviors. When I went on exchange at University College London, I worked in the machine learning and neuroimaging lab. So this was something completely different again from what I'd done before. It was completely dry lab, completely in silico. And so I learned about how to apply basically like a pattern recognition program, which used machine learning to decode and try and differentiate between patients with psychosis, their relatives, and also healthy controls. And so now what I'm working on is a protein called PINK1 at the Fawn Lab at the MNI. So PINK1 is a protein involved in mitophagy, which is the way that mitochondria get taken by damaged cells. And so one of the hypotheses, it's also involved in familial Parkinson's disease. So we're basically studying the mechanisms by which PINK1 can actually mediate mitophagy, which is like the recycling of cells, and how that might be disrupted in Parkinson's disease based on clinical mutations. And so that's me. Happy to talk about more questions later and do some general stuff. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Joyce, can I ask you to monitor the chat? Okay. We'll continue for now, but if there's any questions in the chat, then just mention it in the meantime. Perfect. Next up, Mara.
Hi, so my name is Mara and I'm in U2 in nursing, basically. So I'm a bit new to the whole research environment. I started the project during last summer in June of 2020. And basically I've been working under the supervision of Dr. Sylvie Lambert, who is affiliated with McGill's Ingram School of Nursing. So what I did was basically an environmental scan of different educational resources for cancer patients that focused on self-managing their symptoms. So self-managing would be something like, if you have nausea, for example, take small sips of water and eat smaller meals, as opposed to go get this surgery as treatment. So what we did is we collected all these educational resources, these websites, pamphlets, and booklets, and we evaluated them on their readability. So what reading grade level do you need to be able to read this paper, this publication? We also evaluated it on suitability. So factors that influence suitability would be, does it have graphics? Does it have any visual aids? Is it culturally appropriate? Things like that. And we also evaluated it on quality. So is the information reliable? And yeah, I actually just finished writing the actual manuscript last week, and we're sending it out for publication in December. So if you have any questions regarding that, I'll be happy to answer it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Amir?
Hello. So first I'd like to thank Sydney for this event and for inviting me. It's a real pleasure. So I'd like to, first thing I'll introduce myself is my name is Amir Attia. I'm in U3. I study in physical therapy. And I also got into research recently. I haven't been doing this a long time. I actually did my first research project in summer of 2020. And a lot of the research was actually done from home. It was just on my computer. So the research project that I did was also under the supervision of Dr. Sylvie Lambert. And the research project that we had was looking at publicly available cancer mobile apps. And these apps we searched for them from the App Store and from the Google Play Store and from the Apple App Store. Can you switch slides? Mm-hmm. So we looked at these cancer management apps and we rated them against a validated scale, which is the MARS, so Mobile App Rating Scale. In total, I think we found around 700 apps, but then we had to narrow it down all the way to around 12. I can answer that question if you like.
Go ahead. Yeah, read out the question.
So how did you apply to become a part of the research project for Mara? But I think me and Mara, we applied the same way because we both worked under Dr. Lambert. So since, physical therapy and nursing were part of the Faculty of Medicine. So usually every year there's like a research bursary award that they send out. And on that list, they have a bunch of supervisors and their project titles. And you basically just have to email as many people as you could and hope that one of them takes you.
Perfect. We actually are getting more questions, and I think that's amazing. Thank you guys. we'll finish all the introductions and then we'll dive right into those questions. Does that sound good? So just
Well, I can answer this next one because I was going to like talk
okay,
about
perfect.
that too.
Yeah, it applies. So perfect. Go for it.
So the reason why I did this research specifically was because I was really interested in mobile health, or mHealth, that's what they call it in the literature. And the reason why I like it so much is because I'm very into global health. So like people, when you go like MSF, so Médecins Sans Frontières, I'm really interested in these kinds of things. And mHealth really plays a vital role in their work. So in some rural communities or some in remote communities, they have a lot of the times they don't have any doctors or any health professionals on site. So they would always kind of do Zoom before it was cool, before everyone was doing it, was their health professional. And that would still be considered as health. And again, like with their phones, they would have mobile apps. And that's why I wanted to get into it, so I could look specifically at cancer apps and rate them. And also, I don't think I mentioned this, but we also assessed the quality of the apps with Mars, and we also measured their usefulness. So that I had to do a literature search, like a sort of systematic review type, and compare and create a grid and create a score, and then mash everything up together and get a final list of what apps could be good for clinical practice. And currently, I finished writing the manuscript. I sent it off to a publisher, and I'm still waiting for the response. So hopefully it works out. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Next, last speaker.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm definitely the non-traditional applicant on this panel, I would say. Last time I was an undergrad was in 2014. Since then, it's been quite a while, but I've had some exposure in research during my undergrad, but then really it came into its own during my grad studies at Western. And now I'm still doing research as a medical student. So medicine is considered an undergraduate program at McGill, so I guess that's why I'm here. That being said, if we can actually go on to the next slide, I think it'll make it a little bit easier for everyone to see. So yeah, as I was mentioning, I did a bachelor's in biomedical science at Western, and then during that time, I applied to do a summer volunteering in an undergraduate genetics lab. It was nothing too exciting, but I saw all my colleagues doing research, and I freaked out. But this is something that I had to be done, so I just applied to a bunch of different labs and got a position in genetics lab. Even though the content wasn't of too great interest to me, it did allow me to see a little bit of what wet lab research looks like. So I thought I would be interested in exploring it a bit more in the topic that I would really like. So for me, I did my graduate studies in stem cell therapy, particularly in vascular angiogenesis. So we can talk a bit more about that later, but it was in essence just using stem cells to promote bioengineering of blood vessels in ischemic tissues. And then once I finished that, I ended up writing a manuscript and submitted it to a journal. And the first review came back was pretty harsh, but eventually my supervisor was able to really help me out with the review process, and we got it published in a biomedical journal. And then once I got to medical school, I realized that I didn't want to do wet lab research anymore. I wanted to kind of step away and do some either medical education or some clinical research. So I don't know if you realize there's a pandemic going on. So a lot of the things, have been shifted to Zoom. And one of the big things that it has impacted in medical education is the learning of anatomy, because before the pandemic, we used to go in anatomy labs and have hands-on time with the specimens. But for the new cohort that's coming in, they're doing this very minimally in the lab, but mostly done virtually. So I emailed a professor who was running the anatomy program and asked him if I could compare the assessment between how students find the in-person and the virtual anatomy. He was great, and he put me in touch with another faculty member who was doing that exact same research. We both wrote a ethics proposal, submitted it to McGill, and now we're doing some medical education research, which is supposed to wrap up by the end of the semester. So I've had, I guess, a few different experiences. I've worked in a wet lab. I've now done sort of medical education research. And over the summer, I also did sort of a solo research project. I wanted to see how COVID has impacted medical schools across Canada. So I created a survey, got in touch with a few of my friends across Canada who were in UBC or UST, got their opinion on how things are changing for them, especially if the exams are getting impacted or their labs are getting impacted. Once I compiled the data, I just wrote the paper and submitted it myself without a supervisor. So this is to say that you don't need a supervisor to do research and publish. So if you have more questions on that, I'll be happy to answer. And then again, just some details about publishing. So obviously I published my graduate work, and then research opportunities don't necessarily have to be in the lab either. So and an example of that is the second bullet point there that says online database update. So if you guys don't know what NORD is, it's basically an online database for rare disease. And I got in touch with one of the authors on the database and asked them, hey, could I update one of the rare disease descriptions, because I see that it's only been updated since 2005. And they said, well, sure, why not? And I ended up using the summer to kind of see what new studies are out on that particular rare disease. And now that is in publication too. So I guess my overall picture is that research can be done in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the lab. And if you're really driven, you don't even need a supervisor sometimes, and you can find opportunities yourself. And obviously I've had a few experiences presenting my research at conferences and some special group meetings like the stem cell group, etc. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up my background.
Wow, thank you so much. That was amazing. We actually have some questions specifically about that. So how did you decide when to leave one lab for another?
Sorry, is that geared towards me or?
Yes.
Maybe if we go over some of the questions we prepared first, and then we can ask these questions at the end. I think it might make a little more sense that way.
Perfect. Okay. So you could keep posting your questions in the chat, and then, yeah, we'll address them at the end. Perfect. So now it's a Q&A. We listed some questions. Just to keep in mind, these are addressed to all of our speakers. Like either everyone could talk about it, or those who feel like they have an answer for it just will speak up. So first question, what inspired you to get into research in the first place?
I can start. So for me specifically, well, the reasoning that I gave, that I always give all the time, and I really think that it kind of holds true, because when I study, whether it's for physical therapy, like specific courses, or for anatomy or for physiology or whatever, I always tend to do research. Like I always look into PubMed. Sometimes they have reviews on specific like diseases or mechanisms or anything. So I use a lot of research for my studying and to gain knowledge. So for me, it's like if I'm also doing research, then it's an opportunity to give back and to also contribute, because I know maybe somewhere down the line, someone might read the paper and feel like, okay, and I understand this topic better.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like the idea of being able to like help other people with that research. When you make something, and like not all research does that, but a lot of them where you can apply it to clinical practice, for instance, or for people to benefit from that information. Excellent.
Okay, for me, it's really just like, I use it as a study tool, like looking into PubMed or Science Direct. So I like if I could also add something back and to add to that knowledge pool, then I think it's a pretty cool thing. And it would expand the scientific knowledge like as a whole, which is good.
Awesome.
Tying into what Amir said, is same thing for me. Like as a nursing student, I wanted to do something that obviously was related to nursing and that would help patients later on. In my case, I was living with my grandma this summer that just passed, so I couldn't do really anything that required face-to-face contact because of the whole COVID context. And so what was really nice about my research opportunity was that it was online, so I was able to do it from home. And even though, yeah, I was in front of a computer all summer, it still allowed me to do something that will have maybe a small but an impact on future patients and clinicians, I hope.
So true. Yeah. Amazing.
So I can expand a bit. What inspired me to get into research really is to figure out if I like research or not. I noticed that a lot of people, like I said previously, were doing research when I was an undergrad, and at the time I kind of just applied to any lab positions just to see what it would be like. And what I realized through my summer experience was that I actually like doing the experimental part of research, not so much the writing. The writing never came easy to me, but I like doing the experiments. So when I was looking for my graduate thesis, I wanted two things. One, a lab where I know the topic is of interest to me, and two, a lab that is doing cutting edge research in that topic. So I'm at the forefront of advancement. And that's really what drove me to research in the first place. But yeah, so at the end of the grad program, I can happily say that it was a phenomenal experience, and I'm glad I did it.
So good. Yeah, it's definitely true. Like, you don't know you like it until you've ever tried it. I know a lot of people like have never done research at all and always thought that's something they wanted to try. And I mean, from all this experience, we're definitely going to get into more how you can apply and how this can become a reality. But I know a lot of people that are tuning in today want to get involved. So that's really something to think about. Focus on what inspires you and really look for opportunities to get that experience. Perfect.
Exactly.
I'd like just to add one more thing, because from my experience, when I did the research, it was also in the summer 2020, so it was mostly online. And like, I never did any wet labs or anything like that. It was just on the computer. And I don't know, mobile, for me, mHealth was really an interesting topic. I think that if I didn't like the topic, I would have probably abandoned the research like halfway, because obviously staying on your computer for 8 hours every day, like just searching articles and writing things out, or being on your phone, like testing out the apps, can be very tiring. So if you're not inspired, maybe like the quality of your research won't be that good, because you're not as motivated to put in like that little details that make the difference. So it's just like an additional thought.
Yeah, it's definitely a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, what inspired me, it was mostly out of like boredom with my classes in first year. I realized that I really enjoyed science. It's just that sitting in a classroom being lectured to is not the way that I really wanted to learn. And so that's kind of like when I started seeking out research positions, and I ended up, I guess, on like the path of like psychiatric research. And for me, that's something that's personally interesting for like a few personal reasons, but also like in general, like understanding something that's so endemic to society today. I think if at all being able to help contribute to anything that's remotely gonna do something good for the world, even if there's no clinical application, I think for me, that's what inspired like my efforts early on. And after realizing that I liked it, I think the idea that it could be something that I could pursue professionally was something that kept driving me through.
Wow, so that's amazing to know that it, not only were you inspired to get into research through that, but that doing research initially is what continued to inspire you to pursue it as a career, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, had I not enjoyed it the first time, I'm sure that I would not have continued on, because it's a lot of time and a lot of effort. And if you're not enjoying yourself, there's way different things that you can spend that are probably better worth your time.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Yeah, I also started research just to try it out, not really knowing if it was what I wanted to pursue. But I've always been interested in the brain, and there's so many things that we still don't understand about it. And once I joined a lab, I just found it, I guess, fulfilling to try to figure things out. And like Armaan said, the implications of research are really profound. The idea that you could contribute to, you know, knowing a little bit more about a disease and helping society is a plus. Yeah.
Awesome, definitely. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next question. How did you obtain this research position? So some of you mentioned it already, but just to hear from those who maybe had a different route.
I think emailing is definitely the best way to do it. I mean, especially now, it's kind of your only option. But I've heard of other students kind of just like knocking on a professor's office door and going that route. I'd say like I had for my first position, I had to email the same supervisor, I think twice or three times before they ended up replying. It's definitely about persistence. Like professors are super busy. So just being able to like get noticed and to show them that you're inspired, I think is the way to get their attention and to give you a shot.
Can I add something else? So I noticed that, well, because I tried actually like since U1 to get a research position, and I only finally got it in U3. So persistence is key. Like I was trying almost maybe every month, like emailing someone, and a lot of the times like I would get like they would respond, then we have a back and forth, but then they would just never respond to me again. So maybe to everyone else out there, just like keep trying, like find other labs that you might like, and also like emailing back the teacher even if they don't respond, like kind of what Armaan was saying. Because actually like my most recent position, well actually my only and most recent position that I got was because I actually replied back and be like, hi, I'm still interested, is the position still open? And I think maybe if I had not done that, I probably wouldn't have gotten it, because maybe they would have like interviewed someone else who would have been more persistent, and they would have like overshadowed me.
It's the same thing for me with Dr. Lambert. I had emailed her, I remember back in February, and she's like, oh, if you're still interested, email me back in April. And then I did, and exactly what Amir said, I feel like if I had not emailed her back, she wouldn't have gone out of her way to email me, because I mean, of course she's busy. And one thing that I also recommend is usually you email the teacher and then you set up an interview. And what I had done at my interview is I had brought a research paper that I had written in CJEP, and the person who interviewed me, it wasn't Dr. Lambert, it was her PhD student, but she said that she was really impressed by my writing style. So I think that's what convinced her to bring me onto the team. So that's also something you could do.
Yeah, I feel like different researchers are looking for different things. So keep reaching out, because they might just be looking for exactly what you have to offer and your own interests. So it's an interesting approach. It really just sending it everywhere to everyone. Oops, sorry. Does anyone have anything to add?
Sorry, I'll just quickly add, for one of my positions with Dr. Flores, I saw a Facebook post in the neuroscience like Facebook group. So sometimes like students, like postdocs or graduate students, do post there if they're looking for someone, or if they need someone like urgently.
So we
Yeah.
will. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to add on to what Alina said earlier. I think there's sort of two thoughts when it comes to how you want to obtain a research position. One is if you're passively seeking a research position, and the other one being that you're more proactive. So I guess I've had experience in both, and what I mean by passive is that you're basically just either cold emailing or just attending maybe one of the open houses of a faculty. And what I mean by active is that if you like a topic of interest and you know you have an idea, email, search and see who would be the best person to email at your institution for that particular research. And that's what I ended up doing. So it wasn't just a cold email saying, hey, do you have any research projects going on that I can help with? It was more so, hey, I read up on your bio and you're interested in medical education. I'm curious to learn about this, and here's a proposal for what I would like to test with you. If you have 5 minutes to spare, I would love to book a Zoom call or a phone call and kind of go from there. What I found, like if you kind of propose a project, it really allows the other party to kind of know that, okay, you're thinking more deeply about the research topic. And even if they reject the project, that's fine. You'll still probably hear a reply back. So that's all I have to add.
That's a very good point. Yeah, definitely.
I can also add that, like, because that's kind of, because that earlier when I was doing is just like emailing people, asking them, like, do you have any opportunities? But then what I kind of changed my method to like what Joban was saying. Like I would read one of the teachers or the supervisor's articles, find something that I liked or something that I could comment on, and then try to give my own proposal and say, like, I think maybe this part could have been like differently. So really showing that you are different from other people applying, because they probably get the same email like 50 times. So maybe showing that like there's something different about you might intrigue them more to like choose you over someone else.
Yeah, just to add on, it does take time. It's not an easy process to really do your homework and then, create a good, solid email. It took me 2 days of reading papers about a particular researcher that I wanted to do research with before I emailed him. So that was a whole weekend's worth of like reading up on what this person did and what kind of research he would be interested in. So it's definitely something that's going to take a little bit of time and effort to curate a good email.
Yeah, it's important, the emails for sure.
I'm just going to jump in with a related question that was in the chat. Someone asked, are there usually opportunities for U0 or U1 students to volunteer in a lab?
Yeah, some labs are looking for students to just kind of do the tedious work. And I think that's what U0 or U1 students, if it's your first lab, like the kind of work where it doesn't matter if you have experience or not. Like for the Flores lab, the person who posted in the Facebook group, they were just looking for someone to like count things in on the computer. So there are definitely opportunities, but it might not be exactly what you're looking for if it's your first research experience. But I think as you get some experience and then you can put it on your CV, mention it in your email, and then eventually you can get closer and closer to doing what you actually want to do.
Yeah, I'll echo what Alina said. I mean, I think it's definitely more challenging when you don't have experience and you're still early on in your education. There are still opportunities. It's just harder to find. And like Alina said, it will often be, for your first experience, it will often be more tedious work and more work that the person you'll be working under kind of won't want to do on their own. But again, once you get this kind of experience, because everyone starts there, once you get this kind of experience, it becomes easier on to either get new positions with new professors or to advance within or with the same supervisor, since you can be like, okay, like I've done this for a while, can I propose a project, or can we talk about a project that we can do together that I can work on independently, and then it'll kind of build on from there. So it's like the more you kind of build on your work, the more you kind of have, the easier it is to get positions, and also it is for you to actually yourself independently be able to come up with experiments and to propose things and to do things on your own, which is something that your supervisor values for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And again, kind of just to repeat what you guys have been saying earlier about how you need to, within your emails, also express what makes you stand out. I think that's something that might help guide you in finding that research position from U0, U1. Sure, you don't have as much experience, but what makes you a student that stands out in different ways? Like if you are, for instance, in nursing and you're in U0, that's okay, because maybe you apply and express your nursing experience or your chosen academic path in nursing, because that might influence, again, their decision to add you as on the research team. Perfect. So we're going to move on to the next question. Keep writing them in the chat. We're seeing them all. We're just going to address them at the end because we might cover it anyway. So what academic or extracurricular experience prepared you for your research?
I'd say a basic course in statistics will go a long way, especially if you're going to be doing experimental-based research or things even in dry labs where it'll be based on analysis of existing data. Statistics would be good. Something that's really emerged and something that will probably be valuable and has been valuable for a long time is like experience programming. So taking a basic coding course, working on projects on the side will definitely go a long way if you are interested in doing research and getting to incorporate that into some of your analyses. It'll speed a lot of processes up. Some things you'd have to do manually, you can just write a short script to do, and it'll make your life a lot easier. So those are in terms of academics. In terms of extracurriculars, I think anything that kind of builds your organization skills. I mean, when you're doing research on top of being a student, you have to be very aware of your schedule and how to organize your time. So I think doing any other activities that would also help you understand how to budget your time and also how to communicate and work on a team will definitely go a long way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Thank you so much. Perfect. Those stats courses, which are not always mandatory, so you could look into them. There's actually a lot at McGill, and some of them are like quite easy to do well in. I've heard like some, but it's really valuable for research too. Perfect. Anyone else?
I also think learning SPSS specifically, because a lot of teachers, well, a lot of supervisors I've seen, they tend to use that. And it is given in a class, Psych 305. That's the one that I took. And it's like basically a course on SPSS. And it's good for any type of research where there's like an experimental design. So it's adding on to what Armaan was saying earlier.
Perfect. Yeah.
If you're a science student looking for some extracurricular, I'm just going to plug the McGill Science Undergraduate Research Journal. I'm a managing editor there. I guess it's helpful if you're an editor to read other undergraduate students' papers and see how professors review papers. Also, if you guys are doing research and you're writing a paper for a course, you guys should submit to MSurge to potentially get your paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. And I think it's just a good learning experience to go through the review process.
Yeah, definitely. And we have from Irina, Psych 204 and 305 are examples of statistics courses that are clear and easy to follow. So thank you so much. Perfect.
I'll just mention one more thing. I don't know if McGill undergrad does this a lot, but sometimes your school might organize workshops on how to use citation tools. That can be quite helpful when you're writing a publication. For example, I know the McGill Medical Research Association just did a workshop on Mendeley and how to use that and navigate that. You'll quickly realize that once you exceed 20 citations, it becomes like a world of mess. So you really want to have a citation tool. So, if you seek out like workshops in undergrad, that could definitely be helpful.
I can add, sorry, can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, no, of course, go ahead.
Just also have another workshop, not just citation, but also how to search literature. So some programs, they might give like a library workshop, how to look on Ovid or like on PubMed or on Sci-Hub or any other database. So those can be useful for finding articles so you can have citations for your research.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to keep going, but again, if more things come up, just feel free to speak up about it. So how did you come up with your research topic? So some of you guys already mentioned it. We'll just add in if there is any extra comments about that.
For me, it was quite simple. For my graduate studies, I just attended the open houses at different faculties, saw which faculty was doing things that I liked, and then I narrowed into which labs I could see potentially myself working in. So a very top-down approach, whereas in medical school, it went the other way around. I knew what topic I was interested in, and then I seeked out which lab is doing that, and so on and so forth. So it can work both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the key is to be open to every opportunity, but still having those ideas start to come up and looking for those opportunities in your experience and your day-to-day life, for sure. All right. We're just going to continue for now. Again, if things come up about this, that's cool too. So what is the process that you follow when writing a scientific research paper? So the manuscript meaning.
I can start. Often, like for your first time, it's going to be an absolute mess. Either you'll have a lot of data or you'll have a lot of like papers to just kind of compile, and a lot of it, like for me, what I did the first time, it was very inefficient. I just like read all the literature that was relevant for the article, had all the analysis ready, tried to fit what would be relevant where, in what order it would be best to present it, and kind of like go through that way. Like Jobin had mentioned, having a citation manager is like essential for writing a paper. When I did mine, I did not use it, and I had like, in my first round, I had like 30 papers, and it was just a mess, especially when you move stuff around. It's a complete headache. So writing papers with Mendeley or EndNote or any kind of reference manager is definitely the way to go. I mean, the process in general, though, you should always, you can write your abstract last, because that's something that you'll be able to write better and put your paper more into context after you've written the entire thing. Writing your introduction can honestly be done independently of what your research is. Like, you just have to kind of set the stage for the field, talk about the things that are relevant for your research, and then kind of bridge into things that would fit into your hypotheses and that you can kind of fit in towards the end. Depending on the standards for your journal, you have to include things on methods, results are pretty standard, and then you have to write your discussion. And so for that part, that's for me the hardest part, is because you have to be incisive, but also not overstep what your data says. And so this is the part that will take a lot of review with you and your supervisor, and you'll often get a lot of comments about this in the review process as well.
Very true. Yeah. So pay attention and really take all the feedback that your supervisors have to give. For sure. Perfect.
I'll just add one more thing. For me personally, I like to start with the methods and the results. Reason being because it's something you've already done. You know exactly what you did, and you know exactly what you found. So it, in theory, should be the easiest two sections to write. And another benefit is that if you are writing your results section and you haven't done your introduction or obviously discussion as well, if you haven't done either of those two sections, you kind of remain unbiased to your results. So hypothetically, let's say you found a result that you remember from your introduction that 4 other papers found something the exact opposite. You might inherently try to underplay that result in your results section. And it's something that it comes like more instinctive, and you may not even realize you'd be doing it. So for me personally, methods and results are the easiest sections to first start with, and they keep my paper as unbiased as possible.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. So being able to keep it unbiased, writing the methods and results first. Excellent. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. It was, from my experience this summer, I noticed for me it was very daunting to just start writing the manuscript like that. And from what I noticed, a lot of journals, they require, they say max 4,000 words. So the manuscript can end up being pretty big. And I didn't like to just jump into writing it. So what I found helpful was for each section, background, materials, and all that, was to create an outline of what I was going to write first before actually starting to type out the sentences. And using my outlines, I would also ask feedback from my team to see like, oh, should I talk about this? Is there anything else that I should add? And yeah, that was very helpful for me.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely rely on your team. Everyone's there to help, and they have more experience too, especially when you're just starting out, for sure. And an outline is always helpful when writing in general, so perfect.
Also, I found, like, for me personally, when I started, like the methods part, I kind of wrote it as I was going along, because I knew that was going to be the first thing I did was the methods. So I started with that, and I wrote like every step that I did, I just like write it down in bullet points. Then when I was done with everything, just make it into a sentence, like into sentences. Then from the results, and then from there, the rest is pretty much just searching literature and like thinking about what you just did.
Definitely, good point. Perfect. All right, we're going to move on. How have you been able to balance being an undergrad student while holding a research position?
Something that really helped me was, my research supervisor is a nurse as well. So she understood a lot of what I was going through in nursing school, because it's a hard undergrad in the sense that you have to balance your schoolwork with basically clinicals, going to hospitals. So she was understanding about that, and she understood that I can't always have the research project as my top priority. Sometimes school does come first, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to, well, being organized and having good time management skills. Yeah.
Learn to be a juggler. Perfect.
Something that's helped me is like to set clear boundaries with my supervisors. So most of the research that I've done has been wet. So like I actually have to be like in the lab. So letting my supervisor know like how many hours I can be doing in a week feasibly to like stay on top of school is something that's very important. In any kind of work situation, you should always set up boundaries. And this is something that they'll respect and that you're entitled to as a student. It's hard to balance research on top of being a student and the other things that students do. So it's really about like honing in your organization skills, keeping a schedule, sleeping well, showering, these basic things.
So can I just ask, how many hours did that end up being per week during school?
So for me right now, I'm doing between 25 and 35, but I think like a healthy amount for an undergrad is anywhere between 15 and or like 10 and 20 is usually manageable.
Okay, good to know. It's just to give everyone a solid idea. Perfect.
Another thing to add is, like, I probably wouldn't recommend like just volunteering. I would say take it or do research as part of a research course, so you can take like 3 or 4 other regular courses, so it's more manageable that way.
For sure. Yeah, and I guess also work up to that, because at some point when you're just starting from U0, U1, don't start right away with 15, 20 hours, especially not 35, 40 hours. Really work on just getting yourself familiar with research and balancing that with school, and then you could work your way up as you become more comfortable. So I know people are saying it's a lot of hours, but
normally it wouldn't. Like I can't believe you work 20, what did you say, 25 to 35? That's insane.
It's the 4.5 credits. So I get 4.5 credits out of my schedule. So that's kind of what gives me the flexibility. I just don't really have free time, but my postdoc is kind of crazy, so that's what he expects.
Damn. But yeah, like for if you want to take like a 396, it's definitely not, I think. I don't know if someone else knows this better, but I remember it being somewhere between 9 and 12 hours. So yeah, you can take a 396 in your first year. That's what I did, and it wasn't a big commitment.
perfect.
I think it's worth mentioning that you should definitely know your limits, and sometimes that can that you only realize that once you're sort of in the midst of the research and you've already signed up and you already have a commitment, and then you realize you're not able to balance your work and research at the same time. That has happened to me initially when I first started medical school in first year. I was very proactive, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to start a research right away. And I found an upper year med student, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do research with you. And he gave me a lot of deadlines. At the time, I was like, okay, I can manage this. But then the med school curriculum started, and we have exams every 4 weeks. So I quickly realized that this was not going to be feasible. So I reached out to him and I explained to him, this is what I was going through, and it's hard for me to commit the time that he was expecting. And because he was a med student, he knew exactly what I was going through. So he was very understanding and told me that, you know, that's fine. We'll put the project on pause for now, and then we can see if we can come back to it in a few years or in the next semester or what have you. So sometimes just realize that, you know, we all can't just have superhero powers to run through schoolwork and research. It's okay. It's okay to step back and reevaluate if something is really stressing you out.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right, we're going to move forward for now. What are some common misconceptions about being involved in research? Well, what are some things that people have thought?
I think a lot of times people imagine if you're involved in research, you're wearing your lab coat, you're in a lab, but like I said, that's what lab I did, I guess, more dry lab in the sense that I never stepped into a lab. I was just in front of my computer during the summer. So research does not necessarily entail being in the lab. It could also be, other work as well.
Definitely. It's also like, what did you think before going into research? Like, did you think that if you went into research, it would be, you have to pursue a research career? I know that's a common misconception. Does anyone want to talk about that?
Similar to what Sydney just, oh, sorry.
That's okay. You can
go ahead. Oh, okay. So similar to what Sydney just said, someone asked if it's useful to try out research as an undergrad, even though you know that you don't want to go into the academia route later on.
Yeah, exactly. I think a big misconception, at least in my grad program, was that if you couldn't figure out what you want to do with your career, you do research. And you know, that's definitely not true. I think I met some amazing people in my lab who were very passionate about research from the get-go, and they wanted a career in academia, and that's what they're doing now. For me, it was more so to see if I'd like research or not. And as I mentioned earlier, once I actually was doing research with on the topic that I was interested in, it was very exciting. And similar to a comment already made, I think COVID or not, a lot of your time spent in research will be on your laptop. You are going to be doing experiments, but research does entail a lot of reading of others, like other research, other reviews, other first author, primary papers of experiments. So you might be doing your own wet lab experiments, but to consolidate that into a good manuscript, you're going to be doing a lot of reading.
Absolutely.
I can add on to what was said earlier. Like for me, basically, I saw it as like one big essay. So that's kind of like how I viewed it. So it's really like the data collecting part can be done like quite quickly, depending on the research that you're doing. Like for me, it took like almost a week and a half to 2 weeks. And then the rest of the time, like the rest for 2 months, it was just reading, figuring out what you're going to say, and seeing what other people have said before you.
Yeah, perfect. And if anyone has any comments about their misconceptions about research, you could type it in the chat also, and we can ask that as well. So we'll move forward for now. So what is some advice that you wish you knew before getting involved in research?
I guess something I didn't consider at first, but I realize now is quite important, is the lab environment. So different labs will work very differently. Some are more competitive, some are more collaborative. Sometimes the PI is really hands-on, and other times like you just never see them. So I think I would suggest trying different labs and seeing what kind of a lab suits you. And I would also suggest talking to students in a lab that you're thinking of joining, either if you know them or after the interview process. That's something that you can ask to do. Also, if you're interested in getting published, I would recommend that you really do your research before you contact PI. So like look at their productivity, so how much they published in like the last 5 years maybe. Look at the impact factor of the journals that they published in. Maybe look at their H-index, which is a measure of how highly cited they are. And last thing I would suggest is if you're looking for a PI that you want to stay with for a while, you might want to look at where their trainees have ended up. So sometimes they put that on their website. Other times there are other websites that do that, like for neuroscience, there's a website called NeuroTree that shows you where their past students have ended up. So I think that's really useful in terms of looking at how good of a mentor they are, and it also gives you an idea of their network.
Such good points. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Any other good advice to mention to people just starting out or people looking for more diverse research experience? We have a lot of new students that haven't been involved with research yet. So any kind of advice of what they could do now or what they could expect right away could be very helpful too. Okay, so if more things come up, we'll mention it as we go. Tell us about the editing process. So how has it been submitting for publications?
So for me, my article got rejected for the first time. So I had written up like a 4,000 word manuscript as a primary research article, and we submitted it to our journal. And the editor had written back to us with lots of comments and be like, we're not going to accept this. We were kind of like defeated at the time. And that's kind of when I figured out like you have to separate your worth from, you know, external validation. It's just something that's rejection's a part of the process. But the editor actually really enjoyed our topic and what we wrote about, and they suggested resubmitting as an editorial. So that's what we did. So I had to go down and condense this 4,000 word article down to like 1,000 words to fit into the criteria for the letter to the editor. And yeah, and so that one went in, the second time it went in through minor revisions. And so getting feedback again from the reviewers, it's frustrating sometimes. There's always a reviewer who will be more of a stickler on some things than others. Others will be very supportive and encourage you in your work. But then it's just about going through the editing process based on the feedback from the reviewers. One thing I might add outside of the editing process, I think the editing process internally that happens with your co-authors is also really important. The feedback and expertise from all the people who are listed on, you know, the publication that you write are very valuable, and taking into consideration what they say will go a long way for making your paper have like more volume and more diverse and like well-considered thoughts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, the process would be finishing your manuscript, sharing it with the other people on the research team that helped you build the project, and then submitting for publication. How frequently does it come back right away being accepted?
Not very frequently. Rejections are pretty quick, or they were at least for my journal, but you can expect a response, I think, within 1 month based on the status at the journal. And then after that, the correspondence is still pretty slow, so you can expect like anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for responses on revisions and things like this. Because again, like the editors are busy, the reviewers are busy, and often there'll be a backflow of papers at the journal, and so they'll go from there. But often, like if you submit to a journal which has like an impact factor that's kind of like out of your range for what you wrote, you might get a desk rejection, which is like very hard to get. But it's just a part of the process, and you'll just know to just pick yourself back up and to publish elsewhere. Something I might add though, I think that some journals have like clauses where you can't submit to multiple journals at the same time. So if when you get to this position, you should keep that in mind. You can't just like shotgun send out your paper to a bunch of journals and hope they all publish it. You can only do like one at a time, which kind of slows down the process, but something you have to follow.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Anyone else?
There's so many things to say about the editing process. It's a whole other topic and could be a whole session on its own, to be honest. I've had a manuscript submitted where they got accepted without revisions, and I've had manuscripts submitted that came back with a rejection in the first month. So I feel like I've seen both sides of the story. With rejection, I think it definitely is not a good feeling, especially because you put a lot of hard work into that particular manuscript. So the one I submitted this summer about impact of COVID on medical education, when it came back rejected, it wasn't the fact that the work wasn't actually good. It was more so that the topic at hand did not fit the journal's topic. So be careful about where you're submitting. Read the scope of the journal beforehand, so you don't have to now submit to another journal and completely change your paper, because every journal has their own specific guidelines that you need to follow. Eventually I ended up getting published, but it was definitely a little bit of a grueling process, especially while you're trying to manage undergrad at the same time.
Absolutely. So how do you find out which different journals to apply to? Is it just a general Google search, or is there like a repertoire of journals that you look at?
Great question. So for me, I knew that I wanted to aim for a medical education journal. So I actually did start with a Google search just to see what kind of results I would get. And then eventually I ended up on a McGill webpage that talked about top 10 medical education journals. So I forget the hyperlink now, but if you go on McGill research, I'm sure you can find it. And I'm sure it exists for other scopes as well, and not just medical education. But anyways, once I found the list of 10, I kind of just, scoped each of the journals and tried to see what the impact factor was and where my work would be best fitting. Clearly, I made the wrong decision on the first go. But once, it came with a rejection, I knew that I had a better chance at a different journal rather than resubmitting, because it wasn't going to get published there. So that being said, I think a general Google search, start there, and I'm sure you can find links to what are the top 5 journals based on your theme. My graduate work was in chemical engineering, so I aimed for a more biomaterials / engineering / tissue engineering journals, and ask supervisors if you have one for that particular project. They obviously have read a lot more and submitted a lot more, so they'll definitely be able to help you out.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Oh, sorry. That is it actually for our questions. So we're going to be looking at the chat questions.
Maybe I'll start reading some of the chat questions. So the first question is, how did everyone decide when to leave one lab for another? So for those of you who have gone to several different labs.
For me, it's when I realized that what I was learning kind of had plateaued, and that what I would be learning wouldn't be, it wouldn't go more in depth than what I'd already learned, because I'd been in my first lab for 2 years. So I felt like I really had a good grasp on the skills. And after getting rejected from NSERC, I think it prompted me to kind of reconsider whether I would be willing to do it there on a volunteer basis. And so it's from there that I decided that I would seek out another lab and work somewhere else.
For me, the first lab, the commute was just really, really bad to the Douglas. So that's why I left there. Yeah, especially in the winter. And then for Dr. Yang, I just wasn't particularly interested in the topic. I just joined to learn cellular and molecular techniques, which I think are applicable anywhere. So that's why I left there. Why I left the lab in synaptic plasticity. I would say the lab environment didn't suit me well. Yeah, that's why.
definitely things to keep into consideration, like if it's a good fit for you geographically or like even just personally with the people there, for sure. Does anyone else have any comments about their different lab environments or even how to appropriately leave a lab, or is it an open process where you express like concerns, or is it an official email?
I left a letter. I couldn't do it face to face. I was very anxious about the whole experience. It's kind of scary, especially after working with someone for so long, and we weren't on like the greatest terms when I left. So I think that leaving just like a professional and kind letter and expressing to them like how much you appreciated what they taught you, and wishing them the best is kind of the best way to go.
I would assume that I haven't switched labs. I've only worked one place. I would assume that it's like quitting a job. You have a letter of resignation, you write it out, and you express that you want to grow further and you want to explore other fields.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think after your research course or summer project or whatever is done, I don't think you don't have to stay. Like, I don't think they assume you'll stay and you necessarily have to make a grand exclamation that you're leaving. It's more like you tell them, or at least in my experience, you tell them if you'd like to continue, and they do ask if you like to continue. They don't generally assume that. But if it is a good lab with like a good PI and good people, I don't think there generally shouldn't be any problems if you're leaving, because they understand that you're just an undergrad student. You don't know what area of research you want to do and whatever. So usually it's not like a terrible experience. Yeah.
Yeah, particularly if you're starting early with like a U0 or U1, they don't expect necessarily that you're going to stay in for the rest of your life or for a long period of time. So, and you could also be honest in your going, like when you apply initially, to say you're not sure how long you might stay on, but also sound enthused if you want the job, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't personally switched labs, but what I think one should do is at the beginning when you're doing interviews or setting up your project initially, try and have a list of goals that you would like to accomplish with that particular lab. So it makes it sort of clear right off the bat what you would like to extract from that experience. And if hypothetically, let's say you wanted to do 2 conference presentations, and you're like 4 months into the research project and it doesn't look like the supervisor is going to be very supportive of that, you can kind of talk to them and say, this is what we talked about initially. I was wondering if, it's something that I can still do with my project, and see what happens there. I think it is important that your goals are met along with the project. Otherwise, I feel like you're sort of in a stagnant position. And in that case, I would think about switching labs.
Yeah, very good point.
Maybe we'll move on to our next question. Someone asked, have any of you gotten any research awards, and what's the process of applying to them?
I can speak for myself. I think because this one is a very specific award, and it's only like within the Faculty of Medicine, and it's like the award is what it's a bursary, but you can get awards at the end, and that's what basically allows you to get research. And I think they try to see who has like the best research project, because afterwards you have to submit it back to them, and then you could win like prize money or just like the title of winning the award. I haven't won anything, by the way. Just to add.
So what happened to me is I applied for the Ingram School of Nursing summer bursary. And what you do is when you apply for research bursaries, usually you have to submit a research proposal. So they want to ensure that in my case, they wanted to ensure that I was going to contribute intellectually to the project. I'm not just here to micropipette or anything like that. And they also wanted to make sure, because initially my bursary was for 8 weeks, so they wanted to make sure that the project was feasible to do in those 8 weeks, or at least that what I had established was feasible to do in those 8 weeks. And then that's that. And what they asked is, after summer ended, they wanted all recipients of the bursary to basically send in a report on the project that they did, and based on that, they give rewards. So yeah.
Okay, so it's like established within that process that they submit for awards and stuff after.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it's like the best projects could be invited to present at the school's conference or things like that, and they'll have prizes for like best manuscript or things. Yeah, I don't know the details yet because they haven't given the awards out, but I submitted it last week. So
Good luck.
thanks.
Just to add, I received an NSERC last summer. I remember the application process being pretty straightforward. You just go on the NSERC website. It's just like your CV. Okay, I don't remember what else, but it's really simple. The instructions are there. Also, if you work in, I don't know too much about McGill, but for Toronto, if you're working in a hospital, there are typically a lot of hospital-wide awards that you can apply for. So yeah, wherever you're working, just look for awards. I'm sure there are some. And even if you don't think you'll get it, you should just apply anyways and try, because it's not that much effort, I don't think.
For sure. And especially if it's within like a specific environment. So the hospital or McGill, or even your specific program, like Mara mentioned, the in-grad School of Nursing, you never know how many people are even applying. So it's possible that smaller pool, like more of a chance that you might win. So always apply.
For these awards, did you guys have to find a supervisor and a project first, or did you apply to the award first?
Yeah, you have
That's
to
just my
find
question.
a supervisor first. Definitely.
We have another question. What is the best way to seek research opportunities from home, since in-person opportunities are limited due to COVID? I know we addressed kind of different ways of email. Have you guys noticed a difference from before COVID and after in your applications? Are people not looking as much since there are fewer in-person labs, or something about that?
I can shed a little bit of light on this. Yeah, there's definitely been a drop in the number of positions available for research, at least from what I've noticed. Even in the medicine faculty, there's a drop noticed. But that being said, I think there's always opportunities you can seek out, especially now. I know everything is moving online, but one of the great things about having things online is that you can attend a whole bunch of research days without leaving your home. So what I would do is try to see when is the virtual research day for physiology or anatomy or what have you. And when you're there, just try to see whose research appeals to you, and then see which supervisor is there for that particular project. And then you send them an email saying, hey, you know, I was there attending the research day yesterday, and I noticed this project where one of your students was talking about this. I was wondering if, etc. And you kind of start the conversation there. So this doesn't just apply to research days. You can also look for, I guess it's a bit more medicine specific, but a lot of medical departments, they do grand rounds. And if you attend one of the grand rounds, you can see what research the residents are doing, and you can try and approach them if you like any particular research. And usually they're very open to giving you the link, the Zoom link for the virtual rounds of the virtual seminars. So that would be one way to kind of be home and still seek out research positions.
Interesting. Okay, perfect. Thank you. We had a question about is being published very important for an application to grad school?
Sorry, so application to grad school. So while you're applying to grad school, no, definitely not. I don't think, I didn't have any publications before I applied, and I don't think that's particularly an expectation either. Now, while you're in grad school, I think the expectation is that you hopefully will end up publishing your work. It doesn't always happen because some projects, they're science after all at the end of the day, and sometimes your hypotheses may not work. And it's not easy to publish negative data. So yeah, but before grad school, no, I don't think there's an expectation, at least in my opinion.
Perfect. Have any of you applied to an out-of-province lab? Because it was mentioned that with COVID, is there an advantage to branching out and applying to an out-of-province lab, especially since now it's all online and it's probably you can do that more easily now?
I think with online and virtual research, it's definitely advantageous to know some coding and some stats, because some professors who usually have wet labs in this time, they'll have opportunities for students to analyze data. So if they've recorded stuff over the past year or two, and they kind of need a student to kind of go through and with a fine-tooth comb and do the analysis, that's sometimes a possibility. Similarly, things like literature reviews are an option. I feel like that's kind of harder to find without experience, especially if you don't know the field very well, but that's also a possibility. And so it's basically about tailoring your experience and your skills towards what the position would be. And so if you know that a position will be oriented towards analysis or manuscript writing, then you know how to tell them that this is what you want to do and this is how you can do it.
Okay, really interesting. Perfect. Just to read out what's in the chat so everyone can hear. There was a question specifically about neuro, and so anyone who neuro can speak to this, how you find it. There's a hesitance in choosing neuro or psychiatry. Armaan, you talked about the IPN website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the IPN has a full listing of all the professors that are available to or that can supervise, on paper that can supervise a graduate student. And so this can serve to neuro students basically as a repository for literally all of the neuroscience affiliated faculty. So this is a good place to look. You can filter by research area, by hospital, and in this way you can kind of find professors whose research align with your interests. On the note of psychiatry versus neuroscience or neurology-based research, it's kind of up to your preference. There are challenges with both, obviously, but I think you kind of would have to start with one before you do the other. So flip a coin, go for either one first, and I'm sure it'll go well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we just wanted to ask if anyone else has other comments or things that they'd like to talk about in terms of their research or advice to give. Then we're just going to be closing up with some last thoughts. If not, just asking your last questions in the chat from the participants here. Okay, perfect. So first of all, before we end, I just wanted to share one last thing. So I'm going to go back here. The McGill Scientific Writing Initiative is actually hosting an event for those of you at McGill who want to get involved with research. This could be a really interesting opportunity. So it's our SciComm case competition. We're going to share in the group, in the chat, the links to this. So Joyce, if you don't mind sharing these. Yeah, so it's really interesting. We're going to be having teams where you could collaborate to write different scientific articles and different things with our theme, which is environment. So click these links to look for more information. And at the end of this, the winning team will actually be able to submit for publication. So it's a really great opportunity, and it's again, as we mentioned, some opportunities to get involved with extracurriculars and things that could help with research in the future, this is a very good one. So we'd love to offer you guys that. Thank you so much for attending. And everyone, you can definitely check out our Facebook group for more workshops in the future. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We've added the links in the chat. Thank you so much. And thank you once again to all of our speakers. You guys are amazing, so impressive, I might add. And yeah, we definitely appreciate you coming out and telling us about your research. It's really incredible.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Perfect,
Thank you.
all right. And we have gifts for all of our speakers. So we'll be reaching out to you guys in the coming days to thank you again.